Hey guys, we're going to give it just one more minute so that a few more people can join us, and then we'll get started with our Catfish Enrichment. So thank you guys very much for joining us today. Virginia Living Museum live stream. My name's Britt and I'm an aquarist here at the Living Museum. And I do have the mask on, so I apologize if my voice is a little bit muffled. And I'm going to try to breathe as deeply as I can using this thing, because I get a little bit out of breath when I use that. So, but we're going to be doing an enrichment with some of the fish in our swamp exhibit today. Typically these guys get fed earlier in the morning, so it may take them a minute to realize what's going on. But they usually are pretty receptive to any kind of enrichment that we give them. So we're currently in our Cypress Swamp exhibit, which is made to look a lot like the Cypress Swamps of Virginia, where we've got big cypress trees, lots of cypress knees, and all sorts of plants in the water. It's usually a little bit murky, a little shallow, warm water, very slow moving. So you got a particular kind of fish in here. The fish in swamps tend to be very hardy fish. And one of the fish that we're going to be showing, the catfish, there's several kinds of catfish, they are a good example of those very hardy fish, and I'll tell you a little bit why. But first, since I know people are going to ask about them, there is a turtle right down here. This is a river cooter, so he is actually a male. I don't know how well you can see him, but he's not really the focus of this feeding, but I know people will ask, so I wanted to bring him up a little bit. And he's a small kind of turtle that we have here. And you can tell he's a male because he has very long fingertips, and he uses those to kind of wiggle in the face of the female and attract her attention. So while he's kind of gonna be following me around, I'll throw in some stuff for our fish. So what we have for them today is this hamster ball that's actually on a string that I'm holding on to. It's got a little floaty, bit of a pool noodle in here actually that'll keep it afloat while I work with it. And then it is filled with, I don't know how well you can see it, little pellets. So these are pellets for fish. They're great for carp. Specifically kind of more what they're for is for trout and carp and things like that. But our catfish always get involved in every bit of enrichment that we do. So this is also gonna count as catfish enrichment.
55 to Megan.
1 second, let me turn my radio down. All right, so I'm gonna toss this in for them and we'll see what they do. They have interacted with this enrichment item before, so they should know what to do as soon as it kind of gets going. And I'm gonna hold it up just a little bit so not all the food comes out at once. I don't want them to eat everything all at one time, or I don't want the water to get super murky. And there we go. Some of the carp are starting to catch on. And carp are not a native species in Virginia or even America. They are actually a European and Asian fish, and they were brought over a very long time ago. There we go, we're getting some action now. Perfect. They were brought over a very long time ago, both as a food fish and kind of a decorative fish. So people thought they were very tasty. A lot of ancient civilizations, kind of more like the Romans and stuff, they actually relied on carp as a good source of food. So people introduced them over here, but unfortunately, when you introduce a new species, they tend to go wild. They outcompete a lot of native species, and the carp are no exception. They actually eat a lot of the grasses and a lot of the food that live in the grasses, because they will eat just about anything. Now the other fish that we're focusing on here are these two kinds of catfish that are happily gobbling up all of this food. They're very active right now. As soon as they find out there's food in the water, they go nuts for it. So these two species are the yellow bullhead, which is one of these guys here. They're the ones with kind of the very big faces, a very round caudal fin, which is their tail fin, and those are two ways that you can tell that they are that kind of fish. And they have white barbels, so you may notice those whiskers kind of poking out from their mouth, a lot like cat's whiskers. That is the reason why catfish are called catfish in the first place, because of those very feline-like whiskers. But they are a little bit even more sensitive. They're splashing us like crazy. they're a little bit more sensitive than even a cat's whiskers. They can taste through those barbels. And certain species of catfish can even taste on their entire bodies, which the channel catfish, which is the other species, like the bluish colored one over there with a very forked tail, those ones are channel catfish. They can actually taste with their entire body. So they're kind of like a swimming tongue. And it's very, very good that they can do those kinds of things. They can taste with their body and their barbels because they have pretty poor eyesight. They don't really get around using their eyes. And they don't communicate using vision very much either. They actually communicate using largely scent or chemoreception. So they'll release pheromones into the water and they'll pick up those pheromones. And they can actually tell a lot of information about the other fish based on those pheromones. They can tell what sex they are, how old they are, sometimes how big, and even kind of what their mental state or their stress state is like. So if there's a predator around and one fish gives off a particular pheromone, the rest of the fish can actually tell that there is danger and they should be aware of that. So you can see they've gotten most of the food out of this ball already. They're very, very effective at getting the food out of this stuff by pushing it around, but they'll still continue to do that for a little bit. We have a question?
Tyler would like to know, where do catfish live?
Catfish live in a lot of different places. These ones are freshwater fish. There are a handful of saltwater catfish as well, but the ones we have here are freshwater ones. And they love places like swamps or slow-moving streams or rivers or lakes, really anywhere with fresh water that might have food in it for them. As long as there's food, the catfish will probably be there.
Do you know how many catfish are in here?
I do not. That is a good question. There's a lot of them. And once these guys get a little bit bigger and once the weather warms up a little bit more, there's a chance that some of these guys will be released back into the wild, and then we'll put some smaller catfish in here and maybe we'll have a better number at that point. Yes, next question.
Silas and Alvy would like to know, how big do catfish get?
Oh, good question, guys. These catfish, the channel catfish, they can get up to, I believe, what's the world record for channel catfish is 58 pounds, which is huge, and about 2 feet long is typically the upper end of their size range. The bullheads, on the other hand, they're a much smaller kind of catfish. These are all about fully grown. They only get to about a foot long, and I don't know how much the record is for the weights for them. You may also notice that the carp have little whiskers as well. Those are also called barbels, and they do function in about the same way. They're just not quite as sensitive or as long, so it's a little bit less effective at finding food that way. However, they have a very good sense of vision, whereas the catfish are not as good at seeing. The carp can actually tell when we're here. They can actually see us right now, and they're often the first ones to come up for feedings because they see us coming and they recognize certain people, and whoever feeds them most often is probably going to get the biggest welcome from them. They're very sweet. They're easily domesticated, and one of the benefits of that is that they've actually been bred into goldfish. So they are a relative of the goldfish, and they can actually crossbreed, which means that they are quite closely related as far as their species and their genetics goes. You guys have some good questions. Keep them coming. We're going to be out here for a little bit longer. I know they've eaten all the food, so it's not quite as exciting anymore, but now you at least get to see what these fish look like. And you can really tell the difference between the bullheads and the channel catfish when you see them next to each other. You can see that bullhead's really, really big head in comparison to the channel catfish's kind of more neat, very, very pinched sort of face. As those channel catfish get larger, they are going to look a little bit more like the bullhead faces. They get a lot bigger and they get very robust and kind of chunky as they get older. We have some very, very old ones over to the right. So Alexis, if you pan over, you can see with all of those, with all the turtles there's some very, very fat catfish in that tank as well. I don't have any enrichment for them today because we have the gar in there as well, and tomorrow Chris is showing us the larger swamp feeding, so he's going to be feeding the gar and our larger fish as well. But for now, we just got these guys. And they look like they kind of finished up their food, so I'm going to go ahead and take out this item right here.
Tyler, age 4, would like to know, do catfish bite?
Yes, catfish do bite, as do most fish. The catfish bite, their teeth aren't particularly large or sharp. You can actually see into their mouths. They don't have really, really big teeth, but they do bite. They'll bite just about anything. And that's one of the reasons why we have signs on all of our larger tanks saying, please keep hands out of the water. It's because fish like this do like to bite. And one of the techniques for fishing for catfish is actually something called noodling, which I think is a very funny name. And you actually put your arm in the water and the catfish will come up and like put its mouth around your hand and you pull it out just with your hand. So that tells you that their bites aren't super painful. They're not gonna really do too much damage. It still could make you bleed, so we don't recommend putting your hand just in the water and letting it sit there, because you never know, something else might also come along and take a little bite. All right, so I see that there's a question from Tyler asking what kind of turtle that is. That one is a river cooter. So him a little bit earlier. He's the only one in this side of the tank right now, but we have several other cooters and sliders in our other tanks that you'll probably see a little bit more of in our morning session tomorrow. You can see these catfish right now on the bottom, particularly the channels. They are kind of going through the gravel looking for more food. And like I said, they don't have good eyesight, but they do taste really, really well. So those barbells are going through, kind of feeling around just like we would feel with our hands, but also tasting at the same time. So they don't even need to see their food to know where it is and eat it. All right, well, if you guys have any last minute questions, please feel free to put them in the comments. And if you have any questions after the video ends, feel free to also leave them in the comments and we'll try and get to them later and answer them as well. But for now, we want to thank you guys very much for joining us for another live stream. You can join us, like I said, tomorrow at 11 o'clock. We're going to be feeding the rest of our swamp fish in a much larger feeding. And that'll be at, like I said, 11 o'clock. And that'll be here on Facebook. But you can also check out all the rest of our great natural education content that we have on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, even on TikTok these days. So we're trying to hit all the social media platforms so you guys can stay connected to nature as much as possible while we're closed. And while we're closed, I do also want to bring up a topic that has been very important to us. When we're closed, we don't get the revenue from the guests visiting the museum. However, we're still open to the staff and we still have to feed our animals. So if you appreciate the stuff that we do while we're closed or while we're even open, please consider donating to our emergency animal care fund, as that'll help us keep food in our tanks and take care of all of our animals and give them the best care possible. And for information on that, you can go to our website, which is thevlm.org. So that's THEVLM.org. And really, any bit of donation helps. Even just sharing these videos and stuff helps us out a lot. So we really appreciate your guys' support. All right, so that's about it for us today. So we'll see you guys tomorrow, and we want to thank you very much for watching. We'll see you later.